Hello, and welcome to the 58th annual meeting of the Columbia River Maritime Museum. To call the meeting to order, the author of the best-selling book in our museum store, Board Chair Mike Hagland.
Welcome everyone to the 2020 annual meeting of the Columbia River Maritime Museum, which in this COVID-19 year is the first virtual meeting in the history of our great museum. Whether you are observing this presentation live on Thursday, November 12th, or viewing it at your leisure at some other time, we very much appreciate your support, your attendance, and your continued commitment to this museum. In the last year, we lost 3 current or former members of the Board of Trustees who made significant contributions to the museum. We would like now to pause for a moment of silence for Denny Hall, Jack Loacker, and Janice Snow. Let's share a moment of silence and gratitude for their service and contributions to the museum. Thank you. Last year marked the end of the second decade of the 2000s, and we devoted part of our 2019 annual meeting to recapping the museum's many significant accomplishments throughout that decade. We began this year of 2020 with the Board of Trustees devoting much of a day in January to completing a strategic planning process designed to chart the museum's course for the next 5 years. 2 elements of this strategic plan are especially worthy of note. First is the vision for the Columbia River Maritime Museum. And I quote, "We aspire to be a world-class maritime museum, telling powerful stories that inspire people with enthusiasm, curiosity, and appreciation of our maritime heritage through excellence in collections, exhibits, and programming." To help implement that overarching vision, the Board of Trustees adopted multiple strategic goals for the first 5 years of this decade. One of the most ambitious goals pertains to financial sustainability. For the 5 years ending December 2019, the museum is committed to growing our total endowment from the $7.5 million level at the end of 2019 to $20 million. And despite the incredible challenges of this pandemic-affected year, our executive director, Sam Johnson, has already raised $2.9 million toward that goal. As many of you know, the pandemic forced the museum to close its doors to the public for nearly 100 days from March 16 through June 22. To address the challenge of so much lost revenue during this period, the Board of Trustees, Executive Committee, and museum staff worked overtime to mitigate the impacts. A PPP loan and a related grant of nearly $400,000 were secured, expenses were cut, and since reopening, revenues have equaled or slightly exceeded our conservative projection of 50% of normal through the end of the year. The net result is that we will end this year without having had to draw on our more than $650,000 cash reserve fund. The budget approved for 2021 does include a substantial draw on our cash reserve, which is our rainy day fund, but we hope to minimize that draw to the maximum extent possible. To date, the Board of Trustees has elected not to make major cuts to a staff that is critically important to the long-term future of this museum. Without question, one of our guiding principles so far has been to maintain the museum's capacity to be the world-class museum that informs our vision by maintaining this excellent staff. Our ability to deliver on that vision is dependent on maintaining a truly excellent administrative, curatorial, education, and operations staff that we have today. It's a lean but extremely talented group with enormous capacity to reach the ambitious strategic goals of this museum. I would like to share a recent experience that affirms the confidence that the Board of Trustees has in our museum staff. In late October, 2 representatives of the American Alliance of Museums spent 2 days in virtual tours and dozens of interviews that followed an extensive review of written materials that were part of a process that scrutinized this museum from stem to stern. As part of this process, Treasurer John McGowan and I were interviewed at the end of the second day for over an hour. The 2 AAM representatives were Pete Lesher, Chief Curator of the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and Jennifer Kilmer, Executive Director of the Washington State History Museum. Based on their comments during that interview, there is no question that our museum will be successfully reaccredited and that the final report to be issued in the coming weeks will be highly complimentary. One of the major takeaways from our museum was a comment from Mr. Lesher, who is one of the top 2 executives at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum and who knows the maritime museums throughout the U.S. extremely well. He noted that he knew of no maritime museum in the United States that was in as strong a financial position as the Columbia River Maritime Museum, with 0 debt and a significant endowment. Our museum, in his words, is in a, quote, pretty spectacular position, unquote, in this extraordinarily challenging time of COVID-19. In conclusion, I believe that this unusually challenging year of 2020 is revealing that this is truly our time. We have all the necessary leadership and not only the potential, but the likelihood of growing our endowment to a level that assures the ascendancy of the Columbia River Maritime Museum to world-class status. And the fact that this is our time has been symbolically affirmed by the receipt in 2020 of 2 incredibly beautiful clocks, one of which you can see to my left. These clocks were presented by the people of the city of Astoria in 1915 to the Great Northern Railway's 2 record-breaking ocean liners, the Great Northern and the Northern Pacific, when these 2 vessels first became home ported here in Astoria to begin their twice-a-week service between Astoria and San Francisco. The Great Northern went on to set no less than 7 world speed records during her 34 years of civilian and military service. In recent decades, these clocks were on display at the James J. Hill Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, which was established in 1921 by James Hill, the founder of the Great Northern Railway. When this center unfortunately closed its doors in 2019 due to financial difficulties, these 2 clocks were returned to the city of Astoria through a donation to our museum. The tragic closure of the Hill Center after operating for 99 years due to the lack of a sustainable business model is an important affirmation of the wisdom of the business model originally established by this museum's founders and embraced ever since. Avoid debt, manage prudently, and grow the endowment. This steady course, which was charted long ago, has yielded only success to date and will undoubtedly produce much more in the future. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Mike. I know we are all glad that the clock made its way back home to Astoria. So we're wondering, how many of you had a chance to enjoy the Warnock Commons and the model boat pond this summer? Well, now it's time for some CRMM trivia. How many gallons of water can the pond hold, and how many days does it take Gary and his crew to fill it up? We'll have the answer for you after we hear from past board chair, trustee advisor since 1989, and nominating committee member Ward Cook.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today to present the nominating committee report. The nominating committee recommended and the board approved the re-election of the following 10 trustees, and they have been re-elected by the membership. They are Stephen Anderson, George Beal, Steve Fick, Terry Graff, Ted Halton, Captain Dan Jordan, Sarah Tennant, Roger Qualman, William Stevens, and Dr. Gerald Warnock. They were unanimously elected, and we appreciate their service and look forward to the next 3 years. Their terms will go to 2023. The nominating committee also discussed the leadership officers for the museum and recommended that the present slate of officers be reelected. The board met and did reelect the officers. They are Mike Hagelin, Chair, Don Vollum, Vice Chair, Nick Johnson, Secretary, John McGowan, Treasurer, Helena Langton, immediate past Chair, myself, Steve Fick, Roger Qualman, and Kurt Red, advisors, and Dr. Sam Johnson, Executive Director. They have served well, and we look forward to having them serve us another year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ward, and thank you, everybody, for your great leadership. Now, here's the answer to our trivia question. The pond can hold 60,000 gallons of water, and it takes 72 hours to fill. Up next on the agenda is the treasurer's report. And that reminds me, it's time for our shameless plug. The holidays are just around the corner, and the museum store has some of the area's most unique gifts, as well as an amazing selection of maritime-related books. Did you know that museum members receive a 10% discount? And Blue informed me that from Black Friday until December 4th, you get a double discount. Now for the treasurer's report and John McGowan.
Thank you, Nate. Our controller, Connie Silverman, has prepared and I have reviewed the materials contained in our current financial report for the period ending September 30th, 2020. I believe this report is an accurate representation of our operational results as well as the cash and investment account balances of the museum through this period. Our operational results are as follows. Year to date, our operating revenue for the period was $1,786,506. This is against expenses of $1,916,678, resulting in a net operating loss of $130,172. As Mike described, this has been an incredibly challenging year financially for the museum. Due to the effects of COVID-19, we have experienced a decline in admissions, movie sales, and store sales of approximately $882,000 below what we had forecast at the start of the year. This loss of revenue has been somewhat dampened by the museum staff instituting cost-cutting measures across the board, aggressive pursuits of grants from federal, state, and local COVID-19 assistance programs, and an increase in unrestricted gifts and bequests. Our cash and investment account balances are as follows. As of 9/30, our total combined cash accounts held at Columbia Bank and the museum's investment accounts held at Charles Schwab totals $11,795,522. This total balance compares with $10,311,728 as of December 31st, 2019. This is an increase of $1,483,793. This increase in our cash and investment accounts is basically due to the incredible support and generosity of the donors who are supporting the museum as well as the hard work by the museum staff. The museum's balance sheet is strong. As of September 30th, the museum's total assets, including cash, investments, property, and equipment, totaled $22,783,028. And as Mike described, we have no long-term debt. Relative to the museum's financial governance, I believe that the financial management and the systems utilized by the museum are sound. Our annual audit for the year 2019 was completed by our CPA in May of this year with a favorable opinion. Our 2020 audit process will begin the first business day of next year. Internally, our financial statements are prepared monthly and not only reviewed by the museum leadership, but the Board of Trustees as well. And finally, the Board of Trustees approved the operating budget for 2021, and we will be monitoring it closely relative to the actual results achieved going forward. That concludes my report.
Thanks, John, and a big thank you to all of the trustees. We are so grateful for your stewardship of the museum as we've weathered the financial storm of COVID-19 better than most. Now to Sam Johnson for his Executive Director's Report.
Okay, I'm here. I think you need to unblock my video, please. Okay, there we are.
Take it away, Sam.
Okay, Bruce. Good afternoon to all of you that are watching, and thanks for joining this first ever virtual annual meeting of the Columbia River Maritime Museum. The image that you're seeing in front of you right now is not one that I'm particularly proud of. It was done at the request of the Oregon Cultural Trust some years ago and used for public relations purposes for the Cultural Trust. The staff were almost unanimous in insisting that this be my introduction to you for this year. However, I prefer this image here, where I have been just before going to a very nice dinner at the International Congress of Maritime Museums in Finland on the island of Åland, a little bit more formal than the previous image. I'm not sure which of the two images best suits what's transpired to the museum over the past year. But what I can say, and what you've learned from Mike and John so far, and will learn more of from Bruce, Jeff, and Nate, is that this has been an incredibly productive year for the museum, COVID-19 and its associated problems notwithstanding. Certainly financially, we faced some substantial financial difficulties from the closure earlier this year, but we're still strong, and we've been able to keep the staff all gainfully employed during the time of closure, working on important projects that have moved the museum forward using the time when we are not disturbing our visitors. How well we're going to do in 2021 will depend on the COVID-19 control and other factors, but I'm optimistic that we will do well, that a virus vaccine will come along, and especially now with the opening of 2 new exhibits, one later this year and another early next spring, will be visited heavily by new and returning visitors. As John pointed out, or Mike pointed out, our board continues to be an important part of the museum's success. They have managed the museum conservatively, and for that reason, we have a substantial reserve to draw on. Their generosity is the reason we've been able to operate every year since our funding in the black, minor glitches notwithstanding. And through their generosity, we've been able to do in the last 10 years during my tenure, a number of important exhibits or important projects. The first one being the railroad depot conversion of this to the Barbie Maritime Center. Here you can see a beautiful image of it. The second would be the acquisition of the Astoria Builder Supply Building and its conversion into a state-of-the-art collection storage facility, the one that everybody at the Council of American Maritime Museums, when we presented this fiat accompli, they were all absolutely envious, including the fellow that came from the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum most recently. Another project beyond this was the North Coast Auto Project. Most of you may barely now remember this image as you came into town. Thanks to the generosity of a couple of board members, both at the very beginning of the project and then subsequently at the end, we were able to buy this property and convert it to a pond, as you can see below in the lower right. Do we have another picture here? Here's a picture of the pond being on a nice day. Although it's not been formally opened at the museum, people are, as soon as there was any water in this pond at all, people kept showing up with model boats. These do not belong to the museum, but belong to those people standing in the background. So far, it's been used by painters and all kinds of just general people coming and sitting on the rocks, having a wonderful lunch. Finally, I'd like to talk about the lightship. The lightship is a major project that has been sort of in the background of all of the other projects since I was hired 10 years ago. It's been almost 15 years since this was last dry docked, and it is now in serious need of repairs, restoration, painting, and needing to be hauled out and reworked. Thanks again to the wonderful generosity of a past board member, we were able to kick off the fundraising with a gift of $300,000, and discussions with the Murdoch Memorial Trust said that provided we could raise 40% of the 1.15 million that it's going to take to redo this ship, they would be willing to entertain a grant proposal for 1/3 of the total cost. And I'm pleased to say that at this point, we've raised $516,000. And today I pressed the button on my computer that said send. I sent off the proposal to grant request to Murdoch Trust. So keep your fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens there. In addition to the board, the museum staff is obviously critical to the success of this museum. Every person in the last year has worked hard to keep expenses down while keeping services up. Special congratulations go first to Bruce Jones, Deputy Director. Not only has he dealt day-to-day with day-to-day operational questions, but he has also overseen the rather exhaustive reaccreditation process, which he has been referred to already. It's worse than putting together a major proposal to foundation. In addition, he's developed a 5-year strategic plan for the museum and been in charge of securing nearly $400,000 worth of federal, state funds, local funds, to support the museum staff. And I might add, in all of his spare time, he's, as mayor of Astoria, has been piloting Astoria through the shoal waters of COVID-19. So Bruce, you have done a yeoman's job here. I would also like to mention two new employees. Connie Silverman on the left. Connie is the museum's new controller. She came aboard in January. So she got her feet on the ground here somewhat 3 months before we had to close our doors. She's had many years of experience working for various nonprofits as controllers and in a financial capacity. And I would say brings an incredible level of professionalism and knowledge generally about how nonprofits work that both Bruce and I are becoming to rely on ever more every day. On the right, you have Carolyn Woban. Caroline, some of you may know, she was the manager for many years of the Holiday Inn Express in Astoria. Because of this job, her involvement with the Chamber of Commerce and other activities on the North Coast, she makes a brand new, very, very competent, membership and director of membership and communications for the museum. Unfortunately for her, she was hired the week before we closed the doors, and her first day at work was the day that we closed the doors to the general public. So She was kind of at sea for a while, but on the other hand, she, undaunted, has aggressively attacked the issue of keeping the museum's presence known in the community, and just doing a splendid job for everybody. Thank you, Caroline. In conclusion, and letting the other people say what they have been doing, I would like to thank everybody at the museum, the members who are right here today and all those who are not with us, the volunteers who unfortunately on our decision, because of their, most of them are older, we have closed down the use of the volunteers for the most part within the museum for the time being. Certainly the staff, the Blue, Gary, everyone else who's involved with the museum and the board. Thank you all for making this one of the finest cultural institutions in the Pacific Northwest. That's it. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. Oh, wait, what's this? It's the latest issue of the museum's quarter deck. Just another one of the many benefits of your museum membership. Did you know you can give the gift of museum membership? Now to you for Bruce Jones and his operations report.
Thank you, Nate. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today to view this annual meeting presentation. As Sam and Mike have told you, it's been a busy year, and we have a lot to tell you. I'm going to share this picture. I love this photograph of the Coast Guard buoy tender Bluebell. Bluebell, as shown in this picture, was approaching the Astoria 17th Street Pier right out my window. Bluebell's 76 years old. It's been working continuously on the Columbia, Willamette, and Snake River since 1944. It is a working boat, and despite weathering many storms and hard abuse, she's still looking good, still going strong, thanks to her hardworking crews and a mission that's always in demand. And Bluebell really reminds me of Columbia River Maritime Museum. We've weathered a rough storm this year, and we anticipate another year of COVID-induced bumpy seas in 2021. But thanks to our hardworking staff and a mission that is still in very high demand by the public, we're maintaining headway, we're keeping the museum shipshape, and we're focused on our vision for the future. Mike mentioned and read our vision. We finished our strategic plan at the beginning of this year before the pandemic. We took some time to reassess when the pandemic hit, revalidated our goals and our vision. And the vision our Board of Trustees adopted in January remains the same. And, you know, it's about being world-class, telling great stories, inspiring people, and maintaining excellence in everything we do. And we keep our eyes on this vision every day in all of our missions. If you go back to 1975, this is a drawing by our founder, Rolf Klepp. It was his vision for what this museum would be one day. And in fact, this drawing came to light 7 years later in 1982 when we reopened in our current location. And the vision was expanded further 20 years later with our major remodel. And we're still building on Rolf Klepp's vision today. The strategies in our strategic plan fall into 5 major areas. And first, financial stability, strengthening our financial position by growing our endowments as well as contributed and earned revenue. You know, we've always been very proud that we pay over 60% of our operating costs every year through our visitors, visitor-related revenue, the film, the store, and tickets. But even before the pandemic, we recognized that we were at some risk for a downturn in tourism. And the board chose this goal of increasing the endowment even before the pandemic hit. Second, collections and exhibits. We'll create compelling new major exhibits and enhance current exhibits. Curator Jeff Smith is going to tell you a lot about that work in just a few minutes. Third, public engagement. We'll reach more people both in and out of the museum by increasing our visitation, expanding educational programs and community engagement, and making our collections more accessible. Education Director Nate Sandel will be showing you how his staff has transformed educational outreach in this new virtual learning world. We've also revamped our website recently. Check it out at crmm.org. Fourth, campus and facilities. We took advantage of our downtime when we were closed for 101 days, made lemonade out of the lemon by doing some work that is more difficult to do with people in the museum. We did soundproofing in the Barbie Center. We resealed our parking lot, and we made improvements to our galleries that Jeff will tell you about in a few minutes. And finally, teamwork. Our team, our employees, our volunteers, and our trustees are what make us succeed. And we're going to exercise strong governance, value our volunteers and our staff members, because we know we won't achieve our strategic goals unless we take care of our great people. So we're moving forward on each of our strategic goals despite this pandemic, and we're going to update you at the next annual meeting, which we hope will be in person, on our progress to date. I want to tell you about a few of our great community outreach efforts over the past year. Just a week before we closed down for the COVID pandemic, on March the 9th, we held a naturalization ceremony in the museum. Maritime heritage and history are so powerfully shaped by immigrants. What could be more fitting than to host a citizenship ceremony right here at the Maritime Museum? We did this very moving ceremony. It was such a special part of our community outreach. I know it brought me to tears and quite a few people in the audience as well. And we hope to do it again once the restrictions on public gatherings are removed in the future. We also hosted a meeting of the International Women's Forum last winter. We had 4 women with strong maritime professional backgrounds sharing their experiences with the group of Oregon's most respected leaders in the public and private sector. And the panel included, on the left, our trustee Irene Martin, and on the far right, our former trustee Captain Ann McIntyre. When this pandemic is over, we look forward to once again hosting festivals on the campus, like the Pacific Northwest Brew Cup shown here, the Lower Columbia Hispanic Council's Day of the Dead, the Astoria Pride Fest, all things we do every year. We're blessed with such a magnificent location and sweeping views of the Columbia River, and we do love to share our campus with the community. We have been able to do a few things even during the pandemic. Here we see Astoria's own Sparrow Dance Company on our plaza on a warm day just a few months ago. Well, if you haven't been to see us since we reopened, oops, jumped ahead one, please do come by for a visit. And this is what you'll see when you walk in the door: all the appropriate precautions in place and signage, the staff behind plexiglass. We're such a large space, we have plenty of room for our guests to spread out. We've marked pathways through the galleries to keep people separated, and the facility staff cleans regularly throughout each day. Based on our observations during the first few months after we closed, or after we reopened, we planned for visitation at 50% of 2019 figures. And while we hoped for slightly higher, we were pleased to find we've actually exceeded that 50% projection every month. In October, our attendance was 57% of October 2019. Dollars at the gate were 62% of last October. Our 3D film ticket sales were 82% of last October. And I would note, last October, there were 3,000 cruise ship guests at the museum who spent $20,000 at the door. So the loss of the cruise ship business really has hurt us. And if you factor that out, we're doing pretty well. And finally, our wonderful museum store sales were 52% of last October. When you do stop by for your holiday shopping this year, hint, hint, please congratulate our store manager, Blue Anderson, on being selected to serve as the president of the board of directors of the Museum Store Association. We're all very excited, as I know you are, at the news of a possibility of an effective vaccine that could be distributed beginning even at the end of this year. We're just as anxious as you are to see the pandemic in the rearview mirror. When it is in the rearview mirror, we're going to resume our adult education programs like our botanical drawing and bronze casting classes shown here, our wood carving and kayak building classes, and the other ways we share our maritime heritage with the public. And we'll once again welcome school groups back into the museum. We love all of our guests, but young people are especially important to us. Seeing the excitement and curiosity and enthusiasm for our programs and exhibits among young people gives us the confidence to know that the museum will still be in high demand well into the future as these young people grow up and bring their own kids to the museum. Finally, Columbia River Maritime Museum is proud to have been the first museum in Oregon to have been accredited many years ago. And as Mike Hagland mentioned, we recently finished our reaccreditation visit. Reviewers conducted 16 different sets of interviews with staff, board, and also with stakeholders in the community. The areas that the accreditation team looks at are public trust and accountability, mission, planning, leadership and organizational structure, collection stewardship, education, interpretation, financial stability, facilities, and risk management. And we look forward to getting that report in March, and we'll share it with you when we do. So I want to thank you all so much for being members, for visiting, and for supporting Columbia River Maritime Museum. I look forward to seeing you soon. And now I'd like to introduce our curator, Jeff Smith. Jeff's been with us for 21 years. Jeff and his team have been doing some very exciting things and have some great news to share with you. So, Jeff.
There we go. Thank you, Bruce. I just have a few things I wanted to share with everyone. It's been a very busy year this year, as you probably could tell from the previous comments. But as far as curatorial is concerned, it's been especially busy. And I wanted you to see what we've been up to. Here are a few bullet points of the year concerning our exhibit and program work. I'll show you some of the slides that help illustrate some of the work that's been accomplished over this past year. Back in February, along with the Maritime Archaeological Society, we hosted the second annual Shipwreck Conference here at the museum. Keynote speaker James Delgado is shown here alongside MASS President, Marine Archaeologist, and Museum Volunteer Chris Dewey. It was quite an honor to have Jim as our featured speaker, and as usual, his words were inspiring. MASS also announced the publication of their new book, Shipwrecks of the Pacific Northwest, a collaboration of MASS and the museum, available for purchase in our museum store. M.J. Murdoch Charitable Trust asked us to install an exhibit in their newly remodeled headquarters in Vancouver, Washington. Due to the severe light conditions, as you can see in the photo, we were challenged to find something durable enough to withstand the exposure. We suggested a harpoon, and they loved the idea. They now have a mini exhibit about whaling in the Northwest. In addition, they asked us to fill 3 of their display cases located throughout their office building. 2 are pictured here. We have 3 separate themed cases, each one featuring artifacts and information about our 3 upcoming major exhibits, Shipwrecks, Columbia River Commerce, and the Indigenous Coastal People exhibit. In March, COVID-19 redirected people's priorities, focusing on various paper products, water, and perhaps ironically, Corona beer. Undaunted, we pressed on during the 101-day public shutdown of the museum and accomplished quite a lot. Working with Rickenbach Construction and our maintenance crew, we took advantage of the closure to put up additional walls in the entrances to the galleries of the Great Hall, effectively blocking unwanted daylight from entering the spaces. On the left, you see a before and after of the entrance on the north end, and on the right is shown the corridor leading out from the 44-footer exhibit, the so-called zone of terror. By adding extra insulation to the passageway walls, we were able to subdue and redirect the sound from that exhibit, better preserving the contemplative qualities of the galleries beyond the anchor. The audio-video exhibit components in the Great Hall after the last 20 years of repair and patching were overdue for replacement. This seemed like the ideal time to tackle that project, so we scheduled Delta AV to come in and completely renovate those components in the newly named Bricks Maritime Hall. Shown here on the left is one of the new installations that control the lighting, video, and sound in both the 44 and 36-footer exhibits. We also replaced all the theatrical lighting with new LED technology, saving the museum a considerable amount of money in replacement and energy costs over time. We also moved the cannery labels out into the Bricks Maritime Hall from Gallery 3, which is going to be the future home of the shipwreck exhibit. During the public shutdown, we installed a new exhibit about the Astoria Navy Hospital that stood on the site of the River Point development south of town. This new addition to the Naval History Gallery is one more step in the direction of making this gallery more about the effect of World War II on the local area, rather than a history of the U.S. Navy, which it had been for many years. We received a donation of 9 masks carved by artist Bill Rutherford, representing his interpretation of mythical figures from Chinook lore. They have been put on display in the CLEP conference room for a while and will eventually be placed on exhibit as contemporary art in conjunction with our exhibit about Indigenous coastal people in 2024. To respond to the need for online content during the pandemic and to fulfill a long-time commitment to make the lightship accessible to people of differing abilities, we developed an online 360-degree tour of the lightship that is now included on the museum's website. Incorporating historical photographs and video of life on board when the ship was on active duty, visitors can get a real feel for what it was like to serve aboard the Columbia. As was mentioned earlier, we're planning to open a new exhibit featuring the Twin Palaces of the Pacific later this fall. Pre-COVID, we sat down with a team from Formations to hammer out our ideas for the upcoming shipwreck exhibit. We are now nearing the 95% design concept stage and are looking forward to a spring opening. During the public closure, we had Gary and his team begin the demolition of Gallery 3 in anticipation for the work later this winter. They took out 2 large display cases, here and here, to open up the floor for the new exhibit and put in temporary carpet to make for safe transition through the space in the interim. There will be more demolition as we get closer to the construction phase of the project over the winter. In addition to exhibits and programs, we have continued the work of organizing the collection storage space over at the Maritime Heritage Resource Center. Here are 2 views of the latest installment of collections. Our staff have been busy unpacking, identifying, photographing, tagging, cataloging, and reshelving every object in our collections. I'm proud to say that after having been boxed up for the last 20 years, our collections are now finally out of the boxes and on the shelves. Also, over 7,000 items have been digitally uploaded to our Past Perfect online portal. We also added collections throughout the year. Here is a short video showing some of the process a gillnetter goes through making its way into the museum's collection. This was filmed by our assistant curator, Matthew Palmgren. That was a little bit of fun. A total of 55 new collections were added this year, as well as thousands of items cataloged. Shown here, starting at the top left, a lithograph that was published in the Harper's Weekly showing the launch of the Great Republic in 1866, that later wrecked on the Columbia River Bar. Next to the right, we have a pair of binoculars inscribed and given to the captain of the Great Republic by the passengers, grateful for his efforts to save their lives during the wreck in 1879. Top right is one of Bill Rutherford's masks, this one Tillamook. Just a close-up view. Bottom left is a life ring from the famous ship Salvage Chief. And next is a blue blanket from the Aria that will be featured in our shipwreck exhibit next spring. Next is a sailing schedule from the Titanic that belonged to Dr. Waffle, a local Astorian who had tickets for the maiden voyage but didn't go aboard. And at the lower right is a photo album containing many family photos of local interest. We have a month and a half to go and still a lot of work for this year. All in all, it has been a very productive one, I'm happy to say. And now I'll turn it back over to Nate, who will talk about the education department's year.
Hi, Jeff. Well, thank you so much. That was really, really exciting. So everybody tends to expect education pictures to look just like this for the update. School buses lined up in our parking lot and happy, smiling kids in our galleries. But this is our new COVID reality. You would expect to see pictures of Miss Kelly engaging students in the classroom and getting up super early and traveling to schools all over the Pacific Northwest. This is our new COVID reality. You would expect to see photographs of students building mini boats in classrooms. This is our new COVID reality. You would expect to see photos of our amazing docents giving engaging tours. This is our new COVID reality. Immediately after the shutdown, the education department shifted gears and started producing videos, first from home and then from the empty museum. In total, these videos have been viewed over 16,500 times. And if you have not had a chance to watch these, I highly suggest you explore them on the museum's YouTube page. So here's the COVID silver lining. The shutdown allowed us to have some fun while catching up on a few backlog projects, including the preparation of our newest whale mandible. Museum in the Schools. What can I say about this program? For 24 years, the museum has been sending talented educators into classrooms all over the Pacific Northwest. Over 135,000 students have been impacted by the Steadfast program, spreading the excitement, knowledge, and endearing thousands of local kids to the Columbia River Maritime Museum for life. So what happened to this program when the kids weren't in school? After much brainstorming, we developed a plan to get the hands-on portion of each program directly to our students. Starting in April, Miss Kelly began testing our virtual Museum in the Schools program, to great fanfare, I might add. During this difficult time, teachers, students, parents, they all need the museum more now than ever. Here at the Columbia River Maritime Museum, we like to think of ourselves as innovators and as trailblazers. And after the great success of the Museum in the Schools kits, I was asked to present our experience with our colleagues at museums across the country. And what do you know? This school year, tons of museums have been starting to roll out kits to their students as well. Museum in the Schools is fun, but it's a difficult job. It's a job that is person dependent. It takes a special type of educator to make connections with each student, thousands of them each year. We are so lucky to have Miss Kelly representing us in the classrooms for the last 4 years. And if you listen really closely, you can hear her teaching to a class right now, just 2 offices over. Nobody, not even Kelly, understands the true huge impact she has made on the lives of students in our community. But I can promise you this, in 5 or 10 years, some former student is going to come up to her at the store and they're going to explain the impact that her and the Museum in the Schools program had on their life. I can guarantee you that. If we've learned one thing from COVID-19, it's that our education programs, they cost more to run, they take longer to cram and prep, It's just a lot more work. But when Museum in the Schools had to continue virtually this school year, we knew we needed help packing up all of those kits. So we called in our big guns, our amazing museum volunteers. So how many Museum in the Schools kits will Kelly and her team assemble and send out this semester? An amazing 2,623 kits. And that's just for half of this school year. And with those kits, thanks to Caroline, the amazing marketing department, each student in Clatsop County received 2 special passes to the museum in their kit. So we can have the museum reach more students in our local community. Now, Julia, who has been working here at the museum for about a year and a half, typically facilitates our programs in the museum, but she has also been very busy. You may have read some of her great work in her monthly column in the Daily Astorian. Also, as a way to get people excited for the opening of Shipwrecks in March of 2021, Julia has been writing, filming, and editing mini documentaries on her top 8 Oregon coast shipwrecks. A new episode drops on the museum's YouTube page each month. And in the CLEP boardroom right now is Julia organizing all of the speeches that you saw tonight. So thank you for your amazing work, Julia and Kelly. So the MINIBOAT program, where students in grades 5 through 7 build 5-foot-long GPS tracked sailboats with the hopes of a Pacific crossing. We have a mantra in the MINIBOAT program. The cooler something is, the harder it is. And just because things are hard doesn't mean you should give up. You may fail, but real character is what you do with that failure. We stand up, we dust off that fiberglass, and we try again. So when planning this school year, MINIBOAT seemed literally impossible. But then we discussed how letting this program be consumed by the virus was not in line with our mantra. Teachers were begging us for more hands-on programming. They told us we need the museum more now than ever. So we moved our MINIBOAT student department planning meetings and our lessons onto Zoom. And we raised the money to build a mobile MINIBOAT makerspace that brings the construction aspect of our program directly to the students, no matter where they are, even at their home. And yes, this is slightly hard and a little bit crazy, and it takes a lot more energy and a lot more time. But just like all of our education programs that are cool and inspiring, and it is needed more now than ever. The Columbia River Maritime Museum and its educators haven't slowed down during COVID-19. We're just working a little bit differently. And with your help and support, we can be back to our normal routine, hopefully in the fall of 2021. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait to see the portholes lit up again on the lightship Columbia. Now, for some closing remarks, Executive Director Sam Johnson.
Well, you've got a good idea of what's been going on here during the last year. And I would like to thank all of you for your fine presentations and to thank all of you watching for taking the time to join us. It occurred to me some time ago that on my last almost daily trips to Home Depot or Costco, that maybe you should think instead about going to those places for your entertainment to come to the museum. It's quiet, it's safe, and it's interesting, and it doesn't cost you a lot of money. So right now, instead of heading off to Walmart tonight, I think I'll stay here and go wander through the museum. In any case, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank everyone for joining us for the 58th and our first virtual annual meeting. We hope to see you all in person next November. Now, to adjourn the meeting, Board Chair Mike Hagland.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you for your great work today as our MC. Ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully kids of all ages, that concludes our 2020 annual meeting of the Columbia River Maritime Museum. We now stand adjourned